Do you often find yourself bouncing from one task to the next, going from one thing to another multiple times a day? Today's world, we call this multitasking. Many of us, myself included, believe that this skill of multitasking is something that's required to get by in the modern world. Now, don't get me wrong. There's definitely a time and a place to prioritize tasks. And that is the idea of if you're working on something and a new higher priority task comes in, you stop what you're doing, you work on the new task, you complete that new task because it's a higher priority, and then you go back to the previous task that you were working on. Multitasking is slightly different. Multitasking is where you do multiple things at the same time. For a long time, I believed this was the way to be more efficient, but I would submit to you that multitasking is stealing your success, and it's killing the quality of what you deliver to the people around you, whether it's your family, whether it's coworkers, whether it's customers or business clients, anybody that you have some sort of deliverable of product or service to. See, when we multitask, there's a law of physics, right? And not to get too deep into the weeds of physics, which I don't really understand all that well, but I know there's basic laws of physics, one of which is an object at rest tends to stay at rest, or an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless and until that object is acted upon by an outside force. And the same thing is true with us when we're working on something. When we start building momentum, that movement forward, that progress that we've started, it takes a lot more effort to get started to do something than it does to keep doing it once it's started. So what does that mean for multitasking? Well, with multitasking, that means it takes so much effort to get started and it takes effort to stop. But once we're in the rhythm of something, once we're in the zone, so to speak, once we have that momentum going, it's easy to keep going. So why would we want to change that up with multitasking? Now, there's a scripture in the Bible. It's Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10 that says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Some of the translations say, whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your heart. And what King Solomon was saying, this was at the end of his life after he experienced, King Solomon was the greatest, most richest, most influential king of all time. He was known around the world before social media was even a thing. Like, he would have been more successful than Mr. Beast if he were alive today. And he went through some really good times. He was very successful, and then he decided he was going to do things on his own, and things turned bad. And at the end of his life, he returned to God. And Ecclesiastes is one of those books that he wrote at the end of his life where he was talking about his experience of walking with God and then not, and then going back. And one of his words of wisdom from Ecclesiastes basically says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. And what King Solomon was really trying to impress, I believe, is to focus and put 100% of our attention and intention into everything we do when we're doing it. Jesus said in the New Testament that, you cannot serve two masters. And he goes on to talk about money and the kingdom of heaven. But the idea of serving two masters is like multitasking. And when I say multitasking is stealing your success or it's killing your quality, I truly mean that. At the beginning of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Bilbo, who originally found the ring, was telling his nephew Frodo how he felt. And Bilbo described himself as feeling like not enough butter scraped across too much bread. Now, I remember feeling like this in my life about 3 years ago, right before my entire world collapsed. You see, I was multitasking so much that I literally forgot what I was doing, who I was, and where I put really important stuff like evidence. And I was later accused of stealing it. Well, that turned out not to be the case, but because I was so scatterbrained for different reasons, I really destroyed my life. And it all started with multitasking. See, a lot of times with multitasking, we think we can do more stuff in less time. But I would argue And I would submit to you that when we multitask, we actually accomplish less stuff in more time. You see, like I said with the laws of physics, it takes more effort and energy to get going to start doing something, and it takes the same amount of extra effort to stop doing something once we're already in motion. And knowing those basic laws of physics, how is it possible that we can start doing something and then stop doing something as efficient, and then switch to something else and start something new, and then stop something new to go back to the original thing? How is it even remotely possible that that is easier or more efficient than simply doing one thing and focusing intently and intentionally and purposefully on that one thing until that task is completed? Now, again, prioritization is a thing, and there's times where we have to prioritize things and change what we're doing, but that's not multitasking. So think about this the next time you are with your family and you're multitasking, thinking you're going to work while you're hanging out with your family. How is that going to impact your family? Additionally, when you stop doing whatever work you're doing to do something with your family and you go back to work, how is that going to impact your work? Is the quality of your work going to suffer because of it? Chances are the answer to that question is yes. Also, the quality of your interactions with your family are going to suffer. So when you're at work, be at work. When you're at home and with your family, be with your family. You know, there's a phrase that says, love the one you're with, right? Well, that is entirely accurate for our families and for our jobs. If we're at work, we must be at work. We must intentionally do our work and our tasks. If we're at home, we should focus on our family. When we are taking a break and we are focusing on ourselves, we should focus on ourselves and not worry about family or work. There's definitely a time and a place for self-care. Self-care is not selfish. So don't get burnt out. Don't get to the point where I was, where I was so multitasked, I felt like not enough butter scraped across too much bread. Because ultimately that made my world collapse around me because of choices I made. Not only did I sacrifice the quality of my work or the quality of my relationships, I literally forgot who I was and started making some really stupid decisions. And I thought I could compensate and overcome those mistakes or the flaws that I started to discover when I started to get spread too thin and feel tired. I decided stimulant drugs would be a great way to counteract that. That just increased the scatterbrainness. So learn from my mistakes. Love the one you're with. And put 100% of your attention and intention into the task at hand, whatever it is today for you, while you're doing it. Stop multitasking. Stop killing your quality and start focusing and being intentional in everything you do. That's all I got for you today in this video. I love you guys. I will see you in the next video.